What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to another Black Desert video. So today we're going to be talking about the Seraph's upcoming changes. Now, we talked about this in the last Global Lab patch notes, but I wanted to show you guys what I was going to change in terms of my build, like my Lightstones, artifacts, crystals, because those are, you know, a little bit different for a Seraph than your other ones, but we'll talk about that. But just in case you haven't caught the Global Lab patch notes and you want to know what's happening in advance, or whenever you see this today or tomorrow when the live patch hits. Basically, Seraph gets new Rabam skills at level 56, 57, and 58. And these are what they look like. And I'll leave the link in the description to the Global Lab notes in case you guys want to read it. Or I'll just leave a link in the description to the video where we talked about that over again, so we won't do it again. And then we're getting dark ability changes for all of these. So there's light and dark, and a few extra quality of life and damage reduction abilities on a few other skills that are used. So yeah, overall it's a change, and I don't think the rotation from my other video is going to be different. You just incorporate a few extra skills here and there during cooldown. But what I wanted to show you, the main attraction, was basically what crystals I was going to get, and I'll talk about this. So we have a BSR setup, and I'll admit this one is a little bit more on the expensive side, and it's kind of tailored more or less towards endgame players. But if you don't have it, it's okay. Don't worry about it. We'll talk about like beginner all the way to endgame stuff as well. So I've talked about my crystals a lot before, and usually if you are overcapped, I would say this is what you should run. If you don't have the Dusky Rune for the defense, that's okay. Just replace it with more damage. Another option would be like a Stalwart Fortitude, or if that one's not available, you could buy like a Dark Red Fang Valor. Essentially the same thing without the DR or the knockdown resist. So yeah, for what I would recommend most people is if you are under the cap for AP and you're just grinding places, this is the way to go. If you're overcapped, you could do this one. You're basically trading off a little bit of damage for survivability with all these crystals, but if you need more AP, then obviously just add more AP to your crystals. And then this one is more for, I guess, closer to the end game players and people who can afford to trade off damage. And so I only have one Han BSR crystal right now, but the difference is you could go between 1 to 4 of them, because each one gives an extra 25 Black Spirit Rage, and as we all know, for Savior, BSR is actually very important. So yeah, I guess if you were to trade off other things and basically all the defensives you could trade, so like for every 1 BSR crystal, you're trading off 7 AP essentially, but you kind of have to have the Hans, because those don't have a negative effect. Whereas if you have a Jin, for example, this one is -2 sheet AP, so that's where the things get expensive, and it's actually kind of it's hard to get the Jin ones, but if you can get the bonds, those are, you know, a step down, and I'll show you that one as well. So it's a little bit less BSR, like you would need 5 of them, which is kind of a lot. I really think the maximum you could trade off is probably 4. So even if you were to do like 2 or 3 bonds, that's probably good enough, or like 150-ish%. Or if you have Jins, between 1 to 4, sometimes I notice myself getting to like 100%, and then I notice it at like 105, 110. So generally, I would say 1 or 2 crystals is good enough. But like if I were to have none of them, what I would replace these for was like, you know, you could have more health, or you could have Stalwart Fortitudes. But in the case of you're trading off AP to get it back for PvE, so for example, you know how each one is -7, you would have to put in some AP back, so then you do Void Destructions or the regular Destructions that's minimal damage. And so you could trade off 1, 2, and then put the other 2 damage ones for every BSR crystal you have here. But yeah, that's how I would do it. 1 to 4 of them. I think realistically 4 might be a little bit overkill. 2 is generally solid. And it really just depends where you're at in gear as well, because 28 monster AP essentially is pretty big. So, and if you were doing it for PvP, obviously you just would use something else entirely. But for the sake of PvE, the Han BSR crystals are actually pretty good, and that's what I would recommend for that one. So for artifacts and lightstones, I've actually tested a few of them on my Seraph, and realistically, it's the same thing as usual. If you are undercapped, then probably all-out attack is a pretty solid one. And if you are overcapped, the same old Vicious Shadows or target openings are very good options, or Adania, or specifically any species that you're doing in general is always good. But as always in my other videos, I've been talking about which one is better. Vicious Shadows is better if you can get over 60% back attacks. I think someone did the math, and I remember just reading that. So if you're doing over 60% back attacks to enemies, then Vicious Shadows is overall a higher damage output. Otherwise, if you're not locked in, target openings is not a bad one either. So those are the two I would recommend. Ideally, you kind of want to get them both in the long term, but if you were to pick one in general, just know that depends on how locked in you are when you're grinding. Otherwise, species is always good, or all-out attack, most damage output for undercapped. And I've seen people using Death Blow for Seraph. I'm not really too sure how effective it is, because your crit rate is generally pretty good. But it's like a beginner level one. So if you have this one early on, you can't afford the strikes or everything else early on, this is probably a fine one. And let me see, how much are strike crystals right now? Just to keep in mind, this is NA, so amplifieds are about 3.5. If you can buy amplifieds, by the way, and you can't grind Adania spots yet, I would recommend just shelling out the extra 2 billion, just because grinding out 100 end times is kind of more annoying than it is. But okay, so round 1.2, yeah, realistically, getting 2 bill an hour, or even if it takes you 2 hours, probably worth the grinding. So just buy the amplified ones if you can. It's always good. And yeah, so I guess the biggest change that I would make for most people is if you can get BSR crystals for your Seraph, that's good. They kind of have to be Han. Admittedly, that's the expensive part, because it doesn't give you a -2 or 3 AP on your sheet penalty. But this one just gives you BSR, and then you don't lose as much, so you get 7 here. So you don't get that one, and you don't get the extra -2 penalty here. So yeah, this is end game, admittedly, but if you are a beginner, or a returning player, I guess you're mid game, probably one of these is realistically the way to go. If you don't have full Hans in general, it's probably fine. You're gonna get them when you convert your Debarekas and everything. So yeah, maximum damage output. If you don't have the ultimates, just get the Macalods in general. And then try to get the non-void ones, just because those are the endgame ones, and those are a lot cheaper. But for the most part, this is maximum damage output. If you were to do any budget options for crystals, Valors are cheaper, Stalwart Fortitudes are not too bad, and literally just anything that gives just more damage in general. So some of these are kind of expensive, but whatever gives as much AP as you can afford is good. Overcap for people who don't have Han crystals, this is what I would use. And then BSR is for the endgame people. So between 1 to 4, I'd probably recommend at least 2 of them. 2 of them is generally a good point. So 4 is kind of you going crazy with 200% split. That doesn't happen often. So yeah, that's about it. That's all I wanted to talk about. Hope you guys have a fantastic day. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to say, check the link in the description to the video for my Seraph guide video talking about the combos that I use. And yeah, once again, have a code on screen if you are thinking about buying any A coins or game package purchases. It just helps me out. It's always appreciated. and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace!